Hey, everybody. Hopefully, everyone's doing good. Got lots going on, I guess, these days. And I wanted to make a comment on one thing in particular that I've noticed that doesn't seem to get mentioned much in the news. And that is with regard to the residential schools and the appalling treatment of the children there. It's to me pretty clear how it is that this kind of thing reached the point it did, where young kids were. I don't know how they died. I have to assume it's some form of ridiculous abuse, and the fact that the schools were religious in nature. There's nothing. I think there's two things that happen. I guess in that kind of environment, particularly a number of years ago when this was going on, because there hadn't been as much pushback in our society in general on these kinds of religious schools, but and religion in general. But the the idea that there are people beneath you, there are ways of categorizing humans, and if the person who's doing the categorization is religious and you happen not to be in their religion, um, it makes you less human than they are. You're not going to their reward. You're not going to go to heaven. You're probably going to burn in hell, depending upon which religion and how long ago this was. And I guess the sheer number of people who believe that, even today, I think I looked at the Pew poll data on it just recently. Something close to 60% of the religious believers in the United States think that there is an actual hell and that people will be going there. So, and even if you don't think it's a place where people burn forever, it's just you're not going to our heaven. It is a way of categorizing people that dehumanizes them, as far as I can see. How worthy is this person if that's what you think of them? It makes it that much easier every time atrocities like this are performed on a large scale. We had the Japanese, who thought of themselves as more human than others, or a special race, whether it's German nationalists and people who thought that there was something wrong with Jewish people. You name it. There's a way, the way that, and frankly, the Allies dehumanized the Japanese in order to inflict the kind of pain we did on them and others, and Germans to a certain extent. It is an obvious, to me, factor in the way that the indigenous people were treated in these schools. That if you're strongly religious and the people you're dealing with are outside of your religion, it makes it easier. It seems it's natural that it's easier for people to perform outrageous acts of cruelty and to kill even, and think of yourself as okay. Well, it was just someone who was a heathen. It was a savage. So I'm I'm a little concerned, actually, that it never seems to come up. It never seems to be part of the picture that's painted. To me, it's a pretty clear and obvious part of the picture that's painted. And for crying out loud, people who think of themselves as agents of a higher power are able to do horrific things to their own flock, let alone to people outside of it. So giving over control of young children to people like this, to me, certainly was potentially a tragedy in the making from the get-go. So that's one point. one other thing that seems to be going on right now with regard to COVID is we've got places like Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, places that were seemingly avoiding the COVID holocaust of its own, I guess, for a long time. I mean, in the case of Taiwan, it was virtually COVID-free almost for a long period of time. And there are a number of factors. I just finished reading, and I'll link to it in my email. A large number of factors that are, in fact, at play here. There might be some genetic resistance to these kinds of viruses that is part of the makeup of people of those regions that are seemingly escaping. It could be the climate in those regions. It could be socialization of people in those regions. Many factors are at play here when it comes to this kind of complex interplay between a social animal like a human being and a virus that is transmitted through contact between us. So the viral load is a huge part of it. It might, you need to deliver, and this is part of, it's something that a lot of people don't get. There is a exposure to a virus, to someone carrying the virus. You could be in fairly close contact with someone who's carrying the virus, and if it's outside, it seems not to make a difference. You need close contact to someone shedding large amounts of the virus for a certain period of time, in a place where you're protected from the wind and the sun and whatever else, for it to really be transmitted. Fortunate for us, because if it was any easier to transmit, it would have run through us far faster. But the new variants are certainly part of the picture too. But in the case of Taiwan, from the article I've linked to, the fellow that wrote this, I believe is a guy, indicated that from the get-go, they didn't have the kind of hermetically sealed kind of border and policies with regards to people coming into the country that you would have thought. It seems as though they, and it got looser, I guess, as time went on, but there was a lot of interaction between people and potential carriers coming from other countries, and they didn't require that people get tested regularly who were doing those interactions. They didn't require that there be barriers between the people, say in a taxi cab or in a hotel, and they didn't require that people be isolated completely with those that were coming in contact with them. There was a whole bunch of potential issues with the way that Taiwan was dealing with it. And as we found out here, once you get to a certain number of infections, it explodes. It's just in the way that there's a herd immunity, there's kind of a herd infection number that just causes the numbers to just jump. And when the numbers get to be to that point, then it's impossible to do contact tracing anymore unless you've got some kind of a app like the Canadian government tried to get us to download. Although paranoid people, I guess, were thinking that the government's gonna, I guess the kind of people who think that getting the injection means you're getting a chip put in your arm, probably don't have much difficulty imagining that a government-based application is tracking your every move for nefarious reasons. I actually looked into it and found the way that they're keeping the database clean to be a pretty good methodology, and so I downloaded it no problem at all early on. But unless virtually everyone downloads it, you'd need like about 95 or 80% of the people in the country to download it to make it really useful. And it's a shame we didn't actually. But anyway, to me, there's a lot to learn yet, and there will be lots to learn in the coming years with regard to how the communication of this disease happens, and it happens to be so different in different areas. But it's shocking to me actually. Japan, in particular, and Taiwan, two very advanced countries, didn't make the effort to inject people and vaccinate people while they were down to very low numbers. All that time has passed, and I think Japan's at 1% vaccination for the population. It just shocks me that they thought they were somehow immune. We're going to get away without ever seeing this virus come through their population. I guess maybe because the numbers were low to start with, that's what you might think. But given that we knew that variants were forming like 6 months ago, I would have thought they would have made an effort at that point, but seemingly not. And there's another thing that's going on. Once again, if you look at the link that I sent last time, there's a Dark Horse podcast with the Heather and Brett Weinstein, and they've been talking a lot about ivermectin, which was a drug that is apparently repeatedly and over the course of time shown to be effective as a prophylaxis, as a means of a barrier for catching this disease, and also a drug that can be used to treat its symptoms. And it seems as though it is a drug that has been used. I'm trying to remember now what diseases it was used for. I believe they were tropical. It was a tropical disease of some kind, or tropical symptoms of some kind, and it's out of patent protection. So it's cheap and widely used, widely produced, and already distributed into countries that really do need it. And they theorized that it's possible that this drug was minimized. Like, you can't find anything out about it. There's, the usual YouTube blockages and Facebook blockages to talk about this drug. And a lot of people are pushing back on any kind of move to do some well-funded research on the actual effects, although there is some poorly funded, I guess, research and just information coming out because it was a widely distributed drug in the first place. But the reason for potentially for this drug not being discussed more widely is in order for the CDC and the other governments around the world generally to rush through these vaccines. One of the rules seems to be that you need to have no other widely available approved drug on the market that can be used for said problem to enable the ability to rush through a vaccine like this. So in order to get the Modernas and the Pfizer drug and the AstraZeneca, etc. drugs to rush through approval, they basically minimized the potential of ivermectin. So this is a little alarming if that's the case. So we've got a few alarming things going on. Certainly the way that the lab leak theory was tamped down early on, and then people who would even mention it were attacked as right-wing conspiracy theorists and crazy stuff. And some people still think of it that way. And that was our mass media at work. Those were our trusted newspapers and networks telling you these things. I think it's appalling, actually. and what's even funny at this point is the reasons they give for having done this in the first place. They basically blame Trump for it, and they blame right-wing extremists for it, when that was just a scapegoat they used to bury it in the first place. So it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all, to have eliminated that as a possibility early on, with no good evidence to show where it came from in any way. You don't eliminate possibilities without strong evidence against these possibilities. There was no strong evidence against them. There was just speculation. And the people making those speculations were involved in the research at the lab in most cases. And the rest of the people were just parroting that particular line. So kind of an alarming thing to think that there was no research done, no real journalism done, and because it was associated with, I guess someone associated at some point with Donald Trump, because Trump mentioned it once, it had to be destroyed as a potential means of explanation for this outbreak. And one thing for sure, they're having a heck of a time identifying the animal host that caused all these bat coronavirus changes that have occurred to make it possible for humans to transmit it. Usually, I think it's usually been within 3, 4, or 5 months, possibly at the outside, for something as big as this to have happened and not to have found the animal host. It's always been fairly rapid that they find the animal host, and it certainly would let China off the hook if they were to find an animal host, but it seems as though they're not finding it. So and China's highly motivated. The CCP is highly motivated to find a host, but none forthcoming. So for it to have spread the way it did, and for there not to be some kind of an animal host, it sort of indicates that it came some other way into the population. And I'm glad to hear that Biden is taking it seriously at this point, but it's very late, unfortunately. So anyway, there's that. And there was another thing mentioned by the Weinsteins, that Weinstein, that it really sort of resonated with me, and that was the reason why countries jump on with these approaches. I know as a Canadian, when Canada is given an option of joining in with the United States in a global effort, we feel the draw. We do not want to be in a situation where we are opposing the United States on policy where we don't feel strongly about it. We have to feel very strongly about it before we tend to go against that momentum. And when Vietnam War happened, what other policies? When the Iraqi War, a few other ways and means, we do go our own way, but we know it potentially could cost us at the bargaining table economically at some point or in some way. And so we do tend to go along. And so when this kind of a team is formed, you don't want to be the one on the outside looking in. So it sort of explains why I think a lot of countries will go along, say, with a vaccine program like this, or will go along with a foreign policy. I mean, when you're looking at the world from an Australian or New Zealand or some other vulnerable country, which is in a part of the world that isn't aligned with people and countries that share your values and your point of view, you have a tendency to go along. Australia was conspicuous in its support of the Vietnam War and the Iraqi war, and when it comes to many other policies, they probably would fall in line too. They want to be able to point to, hey, we were with you all the way, kind of thing, when it comes to looking for support if needed by a powerful ally like the United States. So the U.S. carries a lot of weight here, and the weight is, it sort of is pushed in many directions, in all directions, I guess. And their media and the political messaging and the ideas that they push for treatment of things like COVID carry tremendous momentum into the world, and it's, I think, going to be important for us to think twice and three times before we go along, and what some of the values we need to we should definitely think about with regard to the World Health Organization and other organizations is the ability to think independently and to disagree, but remain friends. We just respectfully disagree on these ideas. And when it comes to the way that we deal with pandemics and stuff, we need to all be on the same page, but we also need to be looking at what we're doing in a logical, scientific way, and not let the politics push us in one way or another. So anyway, I just thought I'd get this one out. The residential school thing was bugging me because it's something that jumps out at me, and I think it also jumps out at others. But it's an idea that obviously many of our media are loath to point out, and I think it's important. So anyway, have yourself a good day, good week, and the weather's obviously warmer and warmer and warmer, and things are dry out there, so the bugs aren't too bad up north. So be taking advantage of that. So hopefully see you guys someday soon. Bye now.